Hey friends, I'm just doing a quick follow-up video just to describe the approach and the tools used to pick the third generation Kwikset Smart Key, Weiser Kwikset, and I'll just go over what the strategy was. So this was the bidding for the key that I did in my pick. You can see that my first two pins are low cut, so I only had just to just touch them barely to get my shim into them and then focus on the rest of the pins. So it was actually a slightly easier pick in this case. If I take apart this plug, and this is just to give some tips to those that are working with this lock. If I take this out, this plug has two components. There's the inner plug, and I'm going to call it the sheath, or the plug sheath. And if we look, let me just grab a pick. That's the sidebar. So we can tell it's a third gen because it's a squared off sidebar. And I put the shim into this hole. Okay. And then the shim goes underneath the plug sheath along the sidebar after the first bump into the second bump. And the way that it moves is as I'm picking the pins, I can move the sheath further and further in. So one way to test to see it move, not the sheath, the shim further and further in. So one way to test that the shim is constructed properly is, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the shim off of my keychain. So what I use is I actually used the Kwikset key changing tool, and I cut it along. So I made it a longer, thin, kind of like a probe. The thickness of this material is about 16 thousandths to 17 thousandths of an inch, which is neat. And the width of this is about 60 thousandths of an inch, and the length is about 0.8 to 0.9, so 0.8 inches long. And there's a bit of a curve to it because it goes into this little hole underneath the plug sheath and moves along. So you can see here I can only push it to the beginning, and then I need to start picking pins to push it in further. A quick test to see if my shim works is to put in the key, then put the shim in. So I'm going through the hole, and then gently push it along, and you can see it goes all the way past the first bump, across the sidebar, into the second bump. So it's actually inside there. So as I'm picking pins, it's putting pressure on the sidebar along the pin track. So that's a good way to test that this is long enough. When I first made this, it wasn't long enough. I actually cut it to the first piece that this reset key thing ended at, and I ended up cutting an extra 1/4 of an inch longer to make it work. So it should be, if you want to be safe, make it a full inch long. Mine is just 0.9 inches long, 0.8 inches long. So that's the trick. This plug removes from the plug sheath. There's another retaining clip here on the inside, and there's a washer underneath. So these two pieces come apart further. So you can see, when I did the picking video, how that worked. So I hope this gives some clues and some suggestions. But you can see here, my probe slides in nicely, and it goes into the next bump. It has to go into the next bump because it needs to put pressure on the sidebar as I'm picking the final 1 to 2 pins as well. All right. And I'm going inside this little hole that I have access to. Some people will make a shim that actually goes over the plug sheath, over the bend, and then into the second bump where there's the where it puts pressure onto the whole sidebar there. So it's kind of like the middle of the sidebar is around this point. So by being able to navigate the shim over the plug sheath, and I'm calling it a plug sheath, it might not be the right term, and then putting in pressure there. But sometimes it can be hit and miss. You may not know if you actually are in that perfect spot, in that groove in there. So I'm just like zooming in a little bit. So just like to fish it in between, or this between the plug sheath and the cylinder wall. So this goes inside of a cylinder over above, and then make it pop into there. I probably could jimmy this in, but for me, I just found this, pretty straightforward and simple. It works very, very well. It guides very, very well. The curvature, it kind of developed its own curvature over putting it in and out about a few dozen times and picking this lock many, many times. So like it's kind of like natural, and just like, for me, it goes nice and smoothly. There's also another approach where people will use two shims, like a really, really thin shim and then a second shim. And I guess for them, it just gives them a little bit more easier access to slide and not get caught between the first, pin and the bump. It gives them, some easier access and makes them easier to shim. I didn't decide to take that approach, but I hope that helps. And, it just makes the whole process successful. So if I put this back in, and then put this outer retaining clip together, it makes it so much more pickable to go in here. And let's see if this thing is camera shy or not. But we're gonna test the key. There we go. I'm gonna put it in that hole that I talked about. I'm gonna go as far as I can go to like the first pin. I just got to touch the first couple of pins. Sometimes I even touch like pin 3, pin 4. And we'll see if it works, or if it's camera shy. Okay, so just getting enough clicks in and picking that last pin. And then for me, as I turn the plug, it's harder to back out the shim. So I gotta like ease off just a little bit without closing and locking the pins. But you can see here, I got a successful turn. It took me a little bit longer this time around. I just came back from lunch. My mindset wasn't into it. But actually it's kind of cool that I was still able to pick this within like a minute or two cold, without, picking it back to back 5 times like I did this morning. But that's that. And I'm not going to go through the process of gutting. I already have that video where I gutted it. But that's how it works. Like, so without fail, this works all the time. And yeah, so hopefully that gives enough information. Cheers. And leave a comment and let me know what you think. Bye-bye.